Coming up, international superstar Harry Belafonte joins Mayor Kurt Schmoke in the city of Baltimore for a new campaign aimed at saving our children. We'll tell you about Shots for Tots. The prep gridiron season is kicked off, and we'll take a look at some of the area's most talented young student athletes. And what are kids wearing back to school this fall? We'll have a preview. All this and more next on To the Point.
Morning and welcome to the Point. I'm Horace Holmes. The prep football season is about to kick off here in Baltimore, and we have some very talented athletes who are making the grade on and off the field. And joining us this morning to give us a preview of the season, Keith Mills from the Channel 2 News sports staff, and Sam Davis from the Baltimore Sun. Gentlemen, welcome back. We did this basketball season, and we did it football. Talking about basketball and football, can we make a comparison? You know, we talked when we were talking in the basketball season about how big basketball is in this area. Football didn't really compare.
No, definitely not. Football just never seemed to catch on in this state. As we were talking earlier, there's certain areas, Anne Arundel County, they play some night games on Fridays. They're able to get a following. Same thing in Harford County where they play night games, and in Howard County where they play Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon games. They can draw a following, get some parents and some more of the kids out. In Baltimore City and the MSA, most of those teams play Friday afternoon games, which are very difficult for the parents, other than, say, the kids to make, and sometimes the kids have to get out of school.
That's the big reason, just the scheduling when the games are being played?
I think part of it, too, Sam, is the fact that the kids pretty much grow up, really, in this area, in the rec leagues and everything, playing basketball. Yeah. And football, the youth programs really aren't that predominant in certain parts of the city or the state, as Sam was saying. You know, kids grow up in East Baltimore, grow up playing basketball. And kids in Howard County grow up playing soccer. And
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And I don't want to get too far off the football beat, but what about soccer? Soccer is a growing sport. I mean, you got kids playing soccer everywhere now, all across the country.
I think that has a lot to do with why football is not that big in this area. I mean, you're talking Columbia Athletic Association, huge soccer program. Baltimore County soccer programs have always been big. Anne Arundel County now has one of the biggest soccer programs in the area. And those same kids, I know parents have told me, well, I don't want my kid playing Little League football. I'd rather have him play Little League soccer. And then they grow up playing soccer. It's much easier to stay with soccer than to switch over and put pads on.
Well, when is soccer going to become the type of sport on the collegiate level that a football is, or is it ever?
It may. I mean, the push is always there, but I mean, I think it's got to become popular as a pro sport again. It has to become popular as a pro sport, and then you have sort of that trickle-down effect.
Okay, let's get back to football now. Who do you like in the area?
We chose Poly as our #1 team again. Some people question that because they lost their entire offense, which averaged over 30 points a game. They included about 3 or 4 All-Metro players, but we feel that with all their defense back and their second-team offense, which played a lot last season on the varsity when they were mopping up after they were blowing out other teams, we feel they can, contend again for another A conference.
Keith looks like he's questioning.
No, you always have to. Poly always has to be up there for the simple reason their tradition and their coaching staff and their, JV team plays in the shadow of their varsity. They know what winning's all about, and they come up through the system. Gilman obviously will give them a tough time. Gilman has 2 tremendous players back and a lot of good players back, but 2 really key players back. Randallstown, who I think you have #2, Sam?
Yeah, #2.
They're a good, solid ball club. I think what hurts them, though, is their schedule. They don't really play the schedule that the Poly and Gilman teams play, and consequently, when it comes to push and shove time, that mental toughness, I don't think is there like the Poly and Gilman kids.
Talking about the schedule, the Poly, big game for them coming up.
They open against Allegheny, which is up in Cumberland. Allegheny's won like 5 state titles in the last 12 years or so. And they were the only
football up there.
Yeah, up there. I mean, it's more up there like it is out in in Texas. I mean, football is high school football is the event on Friday nights. Is Friday nights or Saturday nights. This is what the people look forward to. This is an event there. So Poly's going into an area where football is taken very seriously. It's not like it is here, where it's sort of secondary to some other sports.
Who else are you looking at, Keith?
Are you talking about some teams you mentioned down in Anne Arundel County? Annapolis is always a strong football team. Severna Park's always strong. Calvert Hall is supposed to have a pretty solid ball club this year. I'm sure, talked to.
They have quite a few. They have 30 juniors on the team, but all these guys were on the team last season also, and they returned about 14 starters. from a team that finished third in the A Conference and was, you know, right in the running for the A Conference title up until the last couple of weeks of the season. So you've got to watch them.
When you guys sit together and put your preseason polls, how do you go about that process of choosing 1, 2, 3 all the way down the line?
Well, I think you look at strength of competition, not necessarily first, but that's in there definitely. That's very important. Strength of competition. You look at what's coming. You're talking about a preseason poll. You look at who's coming back from last season. You have to look at coaching and things like that. And like in the case with Poly, well, no team reloads faster than Poly because, I mean, these guys, you know, they have 11 guys going, you know, one way, whereas most teams have 8 or 9 guys that are going both ways on their team. So, you know, you're talking about 22 quality athletes versus maybe, you know, 9 quality athletes when they go out to play other teams.
I remember a couple of years ago, City, you know, they won the MSA to beat Poly on Thanksgiving Day game, and City for 2 or 3 years was on Poly's level, and I still think they're on their level. But talking about reloading, you know, City now has a lot of kids that have to play both ways again, and you know, it's tough for some of the other schools to keep supplementing the program. I mean, City, George Petrides does a great job at City, and I'm sure he's going to have a good team, but it's really hard to compete every year with Poly.
Exactly.
And
you know,
Gilman's
coming up to that level again. You know, when you're talking about a team that, you know, it almost has like a B team on their varsity, you know, watching the varsity, and these are the guys that are starting the next season, you know. I can guarantee they have a running back that'll run for 1,000 yards last season, and they don't have a guy returning who ran for over 300.
You know, last year, and I really, you know, Augie Weibel is considered one of the top coaches in the country, I guess. You know, and his offense is predominantly run. Well, last year he had a kid named Chris Lafferman who's going to Towson State, played baseball. He's not playing football, and you know, he threw the ball a lot, and he adapted to his players, and which is all, you know, any good coach can do. You know, Vernon Smith, who was Poly's top running back, could have probably gained on any other Poly team last year, what, 1,800 yards, 2,000 yards last year. He was one of 3 or 4 good, outstanding players, but could have been player of the year any other year at Poly.
Exactly.
All right, speaking of players, we got a couple that we want all of you to take a look at, and we'll give some analysis, or at least you guys will. I'll sit and listen. First off is Roy Marsh from Perry Hall.
Roy is a fabulous athlete. He also plays baseball, runs track. He's a wide receiver for Perry Hall. You're going to see him catching a touchdown pass right here.
An option player.
And he is, I tell you, he's probably a better baseball player than anything, but he is a top-notch football player, great track and field man.
And when he led them, helped lead their team to a 10-1 season last year. In football, they made the state playoffs, and then they went out and won a state baseball championship. And the guy throwing the passes to him, Donnie Burks, isn't bad either, number 9. He's a starting shortstop. He started on the state baseball championship team and was a starting quarterback last season.
Roy's what year?
He's a senior.
He's a senior?
He's one of the top 10 players in the area.
That's all right. So is he going to get a good look by a major college?
Yeah, I think so. He definitely has the size. But he could play I think he could play Major League Baseball too. So.
Oh, really?
I think he'll wait till the spring and see, you know, what type of opportunities come up in the draft.
Okay, we've got a couple more players we're going to talk about. We're going to take a break right now, and we'll be right back. Talk more with Sam and Keith right after this. Stay with us.
Beaver Creek Resort, Colorado. To make reservations, call 1-800-525-2257.
It's coming. And it's coming after you. With $28 million. Coming September 21st to McDonald's.
So you want to have fun and help people too? Then paddle for people. Sign up your team, school, business, club, or group and catch those beach balls. For more information, call 547-7157.
Okay, welcome back to The Point. We're talking football on the high school level. These guys, all 3 of us, got the blue suit memo. We're looking good. We're looking good. All right,
football season wardrobe.
That's right.
Didn't get the red tie.
We got a couple more players we want to take a look at and talk about. Larry Washington from Randallstown Senior High School.
We were just taught Larry has been to like 3 different high schools. I think he's settled in at Randallstown now. You see him here against, I think it's Perry Hall they're playing. Real good player. Streeton Smith mentions him as one of the top high school athletes. In Super Prep, which is a sort of guru magazine for high school football recruiters, they say that he is the #3 athlete in the Mid-Atlantic region. They don't give him a position because he could play about 3 or 4 different positions, which is ranking pretty high.
He looks like a pretty good-sized guy.
Big, strong kid. Whew. Runs hard.
5'11", 200 pounds, and he told me he's been lifting weights during the summer, but he's still, about 4'4" in the 40. So,
Whew. Again, though, he plays maybe 4 real tough games a year, and that's basically it because of the schedule he plays. And whether that hurts him or not in the eyes of a college recruiter, I doubt. But
But when you make it in those magazines, I guess it almost forces those recruiters to come at least take a look at you.
Sure.
Because they're looking at the athlete and not necessarily the team. Not necessarily the team or who they're playing, but the athlete and potentially what he could be.
Okay. Last player that we want to take a look at is Ed Trusty from Gilman, and he plays what position?
He's a running back for Gilman. He's a little guy, 5'7", weight about 175 pounds, very quick, very shifty, powerful runner. He's also starts for the basketball team at point guard, which gives you an idea of what type of athlete he is. Very impressive little player.
Is he going to be a college player, or is he going to play basketball, you think, in college?
I think he would probably play football in college. I think he's a better football player. I don't think he's got the size for Major Division I, but you never know.
Okay. Who's your #1 for the year?
My #1,
You gonna go with
without
Poly?
upsetting Sherman Bristow from Gilman, right now I got to go with Poly. They're defending champs. They're the team you have to beat.
Okay, at least you guys agree on that.
I think the people at Gilman would like that because I got a note from Jody Martin saying thank you. They took the pressure off.
Right. Well, we'll find out about Thanksgiving. You guys are right. We'll talk, and that time we can come back and we can talk basketball.
Oops. Yes,
Okay.
indeed.
We can see how well you did and then talk basketball.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, guys, for joining us. We'll be back in just a minute. Stay with us.
For sports figures and take you to the city's arenas and fields that our local athletes call home. Now, here's your host for City Sports Scene, Gary Stein.
Hello again, sports fans, and welcome to City Sports Scene. The air is crisp. We're in fall, and that means prep football is in the air. And joining us now, Sam Davis, the Morning Sun writer for prep football and basketball. And Sam, welcome once again to City Sports Scene.
Thank you, Gary.
You're a busy man these days, obviously, with football, but you took time out, and we thank you for that. Let's talk A-Conference football first. Poly, the defending champions from last year, an undefeated season, but they've lost every member of their starting offense. How is that going to affect them this year?
I think it's going to affect them early on because obviously it'll take time for the guys to get used to game situations, but the offense that you see out there is not an offense moving up from the JV. It's basically the second-team offense, which played a lot last season. I mean, in 10 games, they blew out opponents in about 9 of those games, so that second-team offense had plenty of time to play.
Yeah, some of those guys on that offense, of course, last year they had the player of the year, according to the Sun, Chris Lafferman, the quarterback, and he threw to Antonio Freeman, the wide receiver, and they had Vernon Smith, the running back.
Right.
Now, the guys going to be replacing them this year are not household names yet, but Tyler is a pretty good quarterback, and they've got Eugene Fields, the split end, and the running backs, they've got both Brooks and Nixon. Nixon broke a long one against Allegheny in the opening game.
Yeah, when they beat Allegheny, the strong state team, state public school from Cumberland.
Right.
I think Tyler's much more of a running quarterback. Remember Lafferman was a guy who completed like 80% of his passes, so you're not going to see him throwing so much. And I don't think that's going to bother Augie Wable because this team is, I think, much more molded with what he likes, just a power running game. Just let the big guys up front run over people. And as we were saying earlier, the biggest difference between Poly and everybody else is you've got 22 guys going against basically, with the other teams, you got 8, 9 guys going both ways. With Poly, you got 11 guys offense, 11 different guys on defense.
And speaking about that defense, 6 out of the 11 this year returned from last year, so it's a veteran group, including Leonard Marcus, who's getting a lot of preseason recognition.
Yeah, it's funny because he wasn't talked about much last season. I think the offense sort of overshadowed the defense, although they did a good job. But Marcus is mentioned in Super Prep, which is sort of the guru for college coaches when they want to recruit high school players, is one of the top defensive. In fact, he's listed as the top defensive back in the Baltimore metropolitan area.
Right. And, one guy, I was talking to Bucky Kimmett the other day at a game, the assistant coach for Poly, and he said, although Marcus gets the preseason recognition, and it's well-deserved, Jelani Rucker has really established himself as a force on that defense.
Yeah, it's funny. He's a nose guard, a middle guard, as Augie Wable likes to call him, and whenever you talk to Augie about his top players, he'll list Jelani Rucker first. his size is not that great when you think of a major Division I school, and I think that's why you don't see him listed like Marcus is in the super preps or the Street and Smiths. But I think that pound for pound, that's a guy that Augie has sort of built this defense around.
Interesting story with him. He has come from a defensive back to a linebacker, now to the line. So he's bulked up a bit, and he's able to play all the positions. Now, who's going to give Poly a run in the A Conference?
Well, I think this year you have to look at Gilman and Forest Park. Gilman is always going to give Poly a run. Last season, they were the only team that gave them any competition, lost to them, I think it was 21-14, and had a chance to win that game. And, and it ended with Gilman had possession on the final play of the game, trying to drive for the winning touchdown. Forest Park this year, Obi Barnes Jr., which is the coach's son, a very good running back. They are the team that I think everybody is pointing at, because Gilman's always there, but Forest Park is sort of the new kid on the block after two sort of 500 seasons in the A Conference. This is supposed to be the year that they're going to challenge the big boys, and so far they're right up there.
2 games they've played so far, 2 games they've won, including a shutout of Calvert Hall, a game in which Barnes ran for over 200 yards, so he is a legitimate threat.
Yeah, he had a very good game. He could have ran for about 300 yards. He had one 80-yard touchdown call back, and he had another touchdown moved back about 50 yards because of a clip, but it was so far downfield that it brought the play back. It turned what should have been about a 60-yard gain into about a 30-yard gain.
As far as Gilman is concerned, they have the 2 preseason All-Americans also, in Jamal Cox, the running back linebacker. He's another one that plays 2 ways. Trusty, the running back, who rushed for about 1,200 yards last year. But they've got a hole to fill at quarterback, and they've got Josh Miller there right now.
Yeah, Miller, I was talking to Johnny Foreman, the assistant coach, about that the other day at the Forest Park game, and he was saying that he reminds you a little bit of Andrew Dosh, their quarterback last season, who was very spectacular and a good defensive back. He's not, obviously doesn't have the experience that Dosh has, but I think that with Cox in the backfield and Ed Trusty in the backfield, a running back, and they also have Keith Cormanic, an outstanding split end and punt returner. With those guys surrounding him, I think they make him a better player, and they have more experience this year than they did under Dosh, so I don't think they lost that much, overall when you look at the quarterback.
It's a season of flux on the offensive line for them, because usually they've got 1 or 2 big guys on the line. Last year they graduated Tim Tatter, who went to the Ivy League. This year they've got John Tyler, another big kid, 6'5", 250. But he's really the only stable guy that they've got on the line. They might have some problems on the line this year.
Exactly. I think if there's a problem, if there's a real concern for Coach Sharon Bristow, it is the offensive line, because offensive and defensive lines, because at the skill positions, we mentioned the guys that are back, they're solid there, but, the lines really have to come together. But their schedule early on, after they played DeMatha in their opener, they have and then they beat Loyola last week. So their schedule's not that tough for a couple of games, so they have some time to get to know each other.
Right, they'll be playing Poly, though, on the 28th, and that'll be a test for them as well. As far as the other teams are concerned, you've got Calvert Hall and City that have to be mentioned up there as well. City has another preseason pick as far as All-Americans are concerned. Ernest Roney, the offensive lineman, about 6'1", 290 pounds. It's quite big.
Exactly, but City was really shocked in their opener. In their opener, they lost to Cardinal Gibbons 16-12, and Gibbons was 0-11 in the A Conference last year, and it lost its season over this year. Calvert Hall, I think, is a team that was a big question mark. They could have been great. They could have been really bad. So far, they've started out kind of bad, because in 2 games they haven't scored a point. Against Forest Park, you watched them, and they moved the ball up and down the field great, but when they got inside the 10 or the 20, they just started self-destructing, and one play the quarterback ran into the running back in the backfield on a key 4th down play for about 2 yards. They've got about 30 juniors. The question is, they're either going to gel late this season, but I think next season you definitely have to watch them.
You know much about the City quarterback, Larry Williams, a little bit of an option runner, not much of a passer, but he seems to have gotten that offense down pretty well now.
Right, yeah. In his second year he has, but they only scored 12 points against a Gibbons team that wasn't returning many defensive starters, so you have to wonder if they're still trying to work some kinks out.
Right. Not only did they not return many starters, they didn't win a game last year, so they've won one this year. What about the rest of the A Conference? Can you lump Loyola, Mount St. Joe's into basically the same category?
Yeah, I think so. Loyola and St. Joe and McDonough, they all fall in basically the same category. I don't think any of those teams are going to be contenders for the championship, but I do believe that you have to watch those guys, because they're all well-coached teams, well-disciplined, and they're just not going to get, blown out by anybody. They're going to hang around, and if you make a mistake against them, they can knock you off.
As far as the B Conference is concerned, Patterson, the champions last year, were you surprised?
No, not really. I was surprised, I guess, when they started out so well. But once they started rolling, you know, I think it became quite evident that they were an outstanding team. Now, they did surprise me when they beat Lake Clifton in the championship because they did a pretty good job against Lake Clifton. Lake Clifton was a heavy favorite in that game. Patterson started out this season 2-0, and nobody, I don't think, really expected that because they lost a lot of that team.
Mark Hall was their quarterback last year, a big kid, 6'5". He's went on to Bowie State now. Now they've got Buddy Edmond at quarterback, and they've got a sensational sophomore wide receiver in Charles Anderson. They seem to be pretty well set offensively.
Yeah, I believe so. Roger, you talk to Roger these days, he sounds real happy about what they're doing. I think there was some question as to whether these guys are really going to come together. And, you know, that the first 2 games, that problem's been solved.
Defensively for them, they've never been a very big ball club. I remember last year they had a couple guys on the defensive line that were 5'5" or 5'6", yet they handled Lake Clifton very well, a case of finesse over power.
Yeah, I think it's a typical B conference team. You have a lot of, you know, really good guys at the skill positions, and then your linemen are probably the size of everybody else's running backs, but they get the job done somehow.
Lake Clifton, also a preseason favorite, hurt in the offseason by some injuries and some academic problems, but they do have Dwayne Washington coming back, the big quarterback, and they've got Sam James, the running back, coming back as well.
Yeah, you have to wonder what's going to happen with them. No, they lost their opener to Georgetown Prep 21-0. David White, the coach there, was expecting a lot of guys back, and as you were saying, a lot of guys were lost because of academic ineligibility. Injuries have knocked a couple of guys out, and it's just, you know, they've gone from, I guess, being a contender now to just a giant question mark.
Can we expect a lot from Carver this year, losing Dante Carter?
You know, Carver's definitely down. You talk to Ken Shell, the coach there, and he, you know, makes it clear that they're rebuilding. They lost to Southern in their opener, although they lost by only about 4 points, but they're definitely rebuilding. I don't think they will be a contender this year.
Now, as far as Edmonton is concerned, they moved down from the A conference to the B conference. I guess they'd be a wild card in there.
Yeah, sort of. They lost their opener to Dunbar by, I think it was by a touchdown or so, but it was on a play with 2 minutes left in the game, a passing play with 2 minutes left in the game. I think they're going to be a strong defensive team, but typically James's teams are not real powerful on offense, but I think you have to watch them because they're just like they did with Dunbar. They kept Dunbar's offense from rolling over them and just stayed in the game, waiting for something good to happen offensively.
Right.
The B conference is just wide open. There's no real favorite in there right now.
And Pete Pompey always complains at the beginning of the year that he doesn't have enough bodies to fill out the offense and the defense, yet somehow he always comes up with enough bodies. And what's he going to do with the quarterback situation, though?
I think he's going to, you know, last season he did the same thing. He let those 2 guys sort of Nathaniel and Donald Meredith, he let those 2 guys just sort of battle it out last season, you know, through the first 3 or 4 games, and never really settled on one. He started the summer the same way, and, you know, if your guess is as good as mine what he's going to do there, I think he's just going to go with whichever guy is doing better at the time. I think they're sort of situation, you know, substitutions for each other. Whoever fits that particular situation better, he's going to use that guy.
Now, they have had a history of producing receivers. They've got one in the NFL right now with Philadelphia, Calvin Williams. They've got another good one in Kevin Washington, more of a tight end type, also a good basketball player.
Yeah, I think the 2 that come to mind most when you talk about the guys that are gone are Calvin Williams and David Lewis, both quick split ends who run good patterns. Now they got Kevin Washington, like you said, is starting forward in the power forward in the basketball team, and a real good tight end. Pete said, like the other guys, you know, he's not as quick as the other guys, but he runs good patterns, and he's about, you know, 6'3", 200 pounds, big, strong kid, and I think he has the potential to go to a major Division I school, but his he has a sore ankle, so he's been kind of slowed by that in practices, and you know, the first game he only played the first half, although he caught 2 of the 4 passes they completed.
Right. Now, a couple of schools have gone from the B conference down to the C conference this year. Going to give them a chance to rebuild a little. We're talking about Douglas, of course, and the other one who we're talking about is, help me out here,
Curley and Southwestern. Of course, Curley dropped all the way from the A conference down to the C conference, and Southwestern, with a new coach, Fred Keiss, dropped from the B to the C conference. Again, the C conference is wide open too. St. Paul's won the championship last year, but you know they're rebuilding. You know, it's like everybody in that conference is rebuilding, so they're looking for somebody to step to the forefront. I believe that I just have a hunch, and you know I'd love to see it happen. Not that I have any favoritism for Douglas, but for what that program has been through, it would be great. They won their opener, and it would be nice to see them finally get it together. And I think that if this drop in a conference helps any team, then I think it helps Douglas more than anybody else.
Back to the B conference for a moment. A lot of preseason talk about Mervo. What do you see with Mervo this year?
Mervo's an impressive team. They won their opener against Milford Milton. They lost a tough game to Woodlawn the following week. I think that they finished last season real strong, winning 5 of the last 7 games, and they got about 15 starters back, and I think that's why people were saying that they were a team to watch, and I think they definitely are a team to deal with. But again, it's like the B conference. There's just no favorite there. It's just gonna, I think it's gonna come right down to the end of this, the last week of the season.
Can you go out on a limb and pick us an A conference champion this year? I always do this to you, don't I?
Yeah, I'm gonna pick Forest Park, and I tell you why. Everybody figures that when they play Poly, they're gonna lose to Poly because Poly has so many, because Forest Park has so many guys that go both ways,
right.
and Poly has so many guys that are, that 11 start, 11 defense, 11 offense. But I think this year that the difference is that Forest Park really believes that they can beat Poly, and I think that's half the battle. A lot of times, you see it in basketball with Dunbar, you see it in football with Poly. Teams come out and they're already behind when the game starts because they look at the other team, they're in awe of them. Well, this year Forest Park's not in awe of Poly, and I think that Poly is down just enough that Forest Park can stay with them this year.
So you did a preseason story on the Barnes situation, Obi Barnes, the coach, and Obi Barnes Jr., the halfback, who's his son, or rather the fullback. So you studied that team. I mean, you talked about that club, and you really feel that they can beat Poly.
I really believe that they feel they can beat Poly, and it's not a cocky, bragging attitude, sort of what we're going to beat everybody. But it's,
right.
Just they really believe that, this is our year. They, it's not overblown. They're not just stuck up on themselves, but they really believe that, hey, we're a good football team. We're a solid football team. We have the intangibles, and we have all the other things that we need to win a championship, and this year is our year to do it.
Sounds like Obi Barnes is a protege of Augie Weibel, who he is.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's the type of attitude they bring.
Play for him at Evanston.
Sam, stick with us. You went to Moscow in the off-season during the summer. You participated in some softball there. We're going to talk to you about that in just a couple moments. And you stay with us, too. We'll be back to talk about that trip and more right after this.
There was a time when people helped their neighbors, and together they built a stronger community. This spirit lives on today in NeighborWorks, a unique partnership of local residents, business, and government leaders. NeighborWorks volunteers have rebuilt over 100,000 homes, restoring pride to millions of neighbors. So help a neighbor and a nation. Join NeighborWorks, reversing decline, rebuilding pride.
Once, there were a few proud men of adventure, men of courage, men who knew the meaning of honor. There still are, the Marines. We're looking for a few good men.
And welcome back to City Sports Scene. We here on Cable 44 will not only be talking high school football this year, we'll be showing it to you as we've done for the past couple of years. Our first game will be September 28th. It'll be at Poly. Poly will be playing Gilman in a replay of a game last year at Gilman, a very close one, almost that Poly had lost. 21-14 was the final. And let's take you back last year to Gilman, where Poly defeated Gilman by 7 points. And Sam, you were at that game last year, and it was a relatively early season game. What were your thoughts at that time, knowing that Poly had all the offensive weapons that it did have?
Yeah, I didn't expect the game to be as close as it was, but as it went on, you could tell that Gilman was just really primed for that game. And you talk to the players and Sherm after the game, they were really disappointed because they felt they could have won that game. They had the ball, they were driving for the go-ahead touchdown as time was expiring, and their quarterback got sacked for a loss on the final play of the game.
Right. It was by Jelani Rucker, as a matter of fact, the guy that we were talking about before, who makes all the big plays. Right. Now, this year, they've got a lot, I'm talking about Gilman, they've got a lot of two-way players. You think that'll affect them against the Poly club like we were talking earlier? Poly with 22 guys who play 22 different positions.
I believe so, because it just where, players get worn down going both ways. A lot's going to depend upon what kind of day it is. If it's a hot, humid day, then that makes it even more difficult. But again, I think that this year, a difference is that the kids from Poly are not as experienced. That's given kids from Forest Park and Gilman sort of a mental advantage in that they're saying these guys are maybe not as good as last year's team, so maybe we have a better chance. And even though they're going, both ways, basically, 9 or 10 guys going against 22 guys, that are going, just one set on offense, one set on defense, I think they have a better chance than they would have last season, because the quality of the players at Poly is down a little bit.
So once again, that's September 28th. Gilman will be at Poly, and that'll be here on Cable 44. Also, of course, this year, like we've done the last couple years, we'll have the Poly City Classic from Memorial Stadium on Thanksgiving Day. That'll be at 2 p.m. live from Memorial Stadium. And also in the first week of December, the MSA All-Stars against the Baltimore County All-Stars. I believe this year will be the 8th annual, and Cable 44 will be there. Now, back to you, Sam Davis, and the trip to Moscow. The Baltimore Sun sent a number of writers over to the Soviet Union to play softball against some of their writers. And how did that whole event begin? What was the process there?
It was funny. It just sort of started out as a joke, and right up until the last minute, some people, not the last minute, but a few weeks before it was going to happen, some people were still thinking it was a joke because we would kid around after our softball games, you know, about this tour to Moscow. And our coach, Ted Shelsby, decided one day he was going to go to the publisher, Reg Murphy, and ask him about, you know, actually would he sponsor us on a tour there. And we were surprised when he said, yeah, you know, they thought it would be, you know, great to go on a goodwill tour of, you know, Russia and, you know, teach the people to play softball, you know. So we hooked up with a newspaper there that, you know, brought us in and sort of sponsored us. And we were in 3 different cities. We started out in Odessa, Baltimore, sister city. We were there for 4 days, and we were in Kiev for 2 days, and the last 3 days in Moscow. In Odessa, we played against a professional baseball team, and we beat them. Their professional team was probably equal to maybe a high school varsity here. And Kiev, we didn't get to play a game. In Moscow, we played against the Moscow University team. They had a real nice field. It was donated to them by Japanese businessmen, AstroTurf and everything. Right. And we beat their team. And then right after we played them, we played against the U.S. women's softball team, all-star team that was in Moscow at the same time we were, by coincidence, giving softball clinics, and they beat us in a doubleheader.
They beat how?
They beat us in a doubleheader.
Just how badly did they beat you, Sam?
It wasn't too bad. Only by a run in one game and 3 in the other.
Okay, that's not too bad. What did you see in the Soviet Union? What was your impression?
It was a lot different from here, and that might sound kind of silly because you would expect it to be different, but I didn't realize how much of a difference it was. Our tour guide told us when we were going that in some ways it might be equal to a third world country, and in some respects, you know, it really was. Just some of the things that we saw while we were there, you know, people standing in line to go into markets, and then actually going in a market and just seeing what a big difference it was from the markets here. I mean, like a 7-Eleven would be a major, you know, food chain there. Going into their department stores, you know, it's sort of like life without color, without the frills. It's like the basic needs are there, but you know, there's just not a lot of, you know, it's just sort of no frills life, you know, just very mundane.
I've often heard it described as gray, but it's difficult to imagine it being gray.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you hear everything about it. You hear, you know, superpowers and all that stuff, and it's like, well, you know, maybe military-wise, but just from the way that the people live, you don't get that impression that it's you know, it's definitely not a superpower in that respect.
What about the people of Moscow, the people of the Soviet Union? Are they much different than Americans?
Well, they're not as anti-American as you would believe by watching movies like Rocky and all those other things. I mean, the people there, they're very warm, very friendly. You know, once they found out we were Americans, they seemed in awe somewhat. And when we got a chance to talk to some people who spoke English, they would, you know, express to us that, you know, they felt like all Americans were rich and, you know, we were very fortunate and things like that. And it was they were good people. They were really good people, and you know, we got to know them real well because we got to stay at some homes and everything. We stayed at hotels in all the cities that we were in, but in Moscow we did break up in groups of 2 and stayed at host homes, so we got a chance to really spend the night with people and get to talk to them, and we really got to know them real well. It was a lot of fun.
Now, your club, your Baltimore Sun team, played against journalists from the other paper there in the Soviet Union. Do they have a high school beat writer there who covers?
No, it was explained to me that in the Soviet Union, they have what they call sports schools. You might remember the basketball team that played, the Odessa team that came here last year. You guys televised the game. They played against Project Survival. Well, that was a sports school. And, you know, as it was explained to me, it's sort of like what we might call here a magnet school. It's basically just sports, and then, you know, they give them the other academics, too. They teach them there. But the school is based on, you know, getting good athletes there. Their high school sports, it was explained to me, are probably like what we would consider intramurals here, the few schools that do have sports, but it's nothing like the competition, the rivalries that go on here. It's just a lot different. It's basically, if you want to play a sport, if you're a good athlete, you go to one of the sports schools.
Do they have any American language newspapers there that you could read while you were there?
They have the Moscow News, which they print in English, and we got a chance to see that a couple of times when we were in Moscow.
Any sports in that paper?
Not much. There was a little bit. In fact, there was an article when we were reading, I think, about the soccer team, because this was not long after the, I'm sorry, not the Pan Am Games, but the games in Seattle. Goodwill games,
right.
Goodwill games,
Right.
about the Goodwill games. So they were talking about the soccer team, which didn't play too well, and it was good though because it was a lot like America. They were blaming everything on the coach.
Now, as far as the softball was concerned, you guys played against them, but you held clinics too, right?
We sort of introduced it to a few people. We didn't they weren't real structured clinic. We just, whoever just happened to show up at the stadium that day, we sort of showed them how to play the sport. I think the women's softball team was much more into a structured clinic where they were, really bringing in kids in groups and everything and really teaching them how to play, But what we did was some groups donated bats, balls, and gloves to us, and we left that over there, and the journalists that we played against are supposed to return, they're coming here next summer, and they told us they're going to know how to play much better. There'll be much more competition. But the few that did play with us, the journalists, once they learned, how to swing the bat and everything, they were making contact pretty well, and I think it's a sport that they can definitely catch on to.
What about fielding? That's always a difficult thing to pick up.
There were a couple of guys that made some good, good plays, but overall, no, because it's they have to learn the rules and learn how to get to the ball and things like that.
Right. Now, I remember when the Soviet Union baseball team came here, they played Johns Hopkins a couple of times over at Hopkins Field. They also had difficulty. Like their first game, they lost 15 or 16 to nothing. They were no hit by the Hopkins team. So I guess they still have a ways to go before they're competent.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, the team we played in Odessa, their professional baseball team called the Dockers, they were, like I said, about as good as maybe a mediocre varsity high school team. When we played them in softball, they weren't making contact real well when we started the game, but as the game went on, they began to make contact, and I think we ended up beating them like 13-10 or something like that. And at one point, the score was 12-2, so they were beginning to get the hang up, and they were coming back on it.
Came back. Was jet lag a problem for you?
No, not really, because what happened was the way it worked out was we didn't really have to play any games on the same days that we flew. We were usually in the cities a day or maybe 2 days before we had to play.
Right. How did you get from city to city?
We flew from city to city on Aeroflight, and most of the flights were about an hour or so.
And were you able to see any of the people from Odessa that had come to this country? Remember, we televised that game, the Odessa basketball team. Were you able to see any of those officials or anything?
The one gentleman I did get a chance to see, and I cannot remember his last name. His first name was Igor. I think his last name was like Stravinsky or something like that. But he was the director of the sports school that the basketball team came from.
Right.
I saw him at City Hall one day, but one thing about the trip was we were being rushed around from site to site. That I saw him, I had a chance to wave at him, but I didn't get a chance to really, sit down and talk with him. But both the baseball teams that we played were really interested in setting up some kind of exchange where they could maybe come here and play against baseball or softball teams, or have some teams come over there. So I brought a couple of letters back, and I'm going to circulate it to some high schools and colleges in this area so that maybe, they'll get an opportunity to come here, or some teams will get a chance to go over there.
Right. The Poly Club went to Japan last year. Maybe they'll be interested in going to the Soviet Union.
I would think so. The baseball there definitely wouldn't be as good as it is in Japan, because they're still learning the sport. And the baseball team in Odessa, they were saying that they really don't get that many fans out to their games, and they're really the only team in the city of Odessa playing baseball. So, the only games they really get to play are when they're competing in their 10-team professional league there. And if I'm not mistaken, Moscow has like the best team. They have a team in Moscow, and they've won the championship the first couple of years. And in fact, this is some of the members of that team are the ones that came to Hopkins a couple of years back.
What about football? Do they play that there at all?
Well, no. Their football is, of course, soccer. They call soccer football, but no, they don't play football at all there.
So they're not going to get into this season at all.
I don't think so.
There won't be any press coverage there. What about your chances of going back there in the future?
Well, one of the things that we talked about when we came back was that it would be interesting to go back in a couple of years and see what it's like, because we were very fortunate that we had a chance to go to the Soviet Union while it's sort of in its infancy of the changes that are occurring. Things are really opening up, so we wondered what it would be like to go back in a couple of years and see what the differences were. I mean, we were able to see people actually on the streets in front of City Hall just really arguing about, whether we should be free or whether we should keep things like they are, which was, very interesting and rewarding. So we'd like to go back. I mean, we'd have to find somebody else to sponsor us. I don't know if the Sun would send us back again, considering we lost to those two women's teams, but we could always try.
You know, talk about the glasnost and the perestroika, the freedom that's coming. Was there any evidence of, you know, the image that we had before that was of the police patrolling the streets and things like that. Was there any evidence of that type of thing happening?
You still had, you know, that was the one thing we saw a lot of when we were there with police. We weren't sure who they were when we first got there because their policemen their uniforms are so much similar to the military uniforms, and you did see more of them on the street than you would see here, you know. But on the other hand, you didn't see a whole lot of them, you know, as patrolling in cars like you would see here. But it wasn't an intimidating, you know, presence. They were there, but you know, like I said, we thought they were soldiers on leave. Sometimes they're usually traveling groups of 3 or 4, so it wasn't like an intimidating thing.
Sounds good. Sam Davis will be looking forward to having you back soon. That's Sam Davis, Morning Sun high school sports writer, and he joined us today on City Sports Scene. As we leave you, let's show you some footage from Memorial Stadium where Clemson battled Maryland and beat them by 1. We'll see you next week right here on City Sports Scene.
I'm Tracy Gold.